Good afternoon, everyone. For those that don't know me, my name's Stephen Kelly. I'm Chief Executive of Manufacturing Northern Ireland. You're very welcome along this afternoon. I am delighted that you've been able to join us for today's session, which is on succession planning and preparing our future manufacturing leaders. When you think about succession planning, most businesses will think about it's about the ownership, the leadership in terms of the CEO, the board, or those kind of C-suite level leaders within an organization. But in manufacturing, leadership runs much, much deeper. It's about the engineers, the supervisors, those skilled professionals who keep operations running every single day. Rather than being used solely to replace leaders, succession planning can serve as a really powerful business strategy, one that helps retain skilled talent, preserve vital knowledge, and build your organization's resilience in the future. And certainly we need that given the environment that we're in at the moment. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Darren McVicker, who's Managing Director of Vickerstock. Vickerstock are a specialist recruitment partner to the manufacturing, engineering, and construction sectors. Since being established in 2008, Darren has led the company through over 5,000 successful recruitment assignments for a wide range of companies from multi-billion dollar OEMs to niche specialist contractors across Ireland, the UK, and indeed in Europe. In the session, Darren will share some insights that he's picked up from that experience in building really strong teams and developing future ready leadership. We'll hear why succession planning at all levels really matters and how it can boost retention, protect key skills, strengthen our business culture, and position your manufacturing organization as that employer of choice. As you listen today, think beyond the CEO and consider how your business can create opportunities to build resilience across every level in your organization. Before we begin, just a reminder, the session is being recorded and we do share copies of the slides and the recording with our attendees and the wider manufacturing community through our e-signs. We love to try to make these sessions as interactive as possible, so please do add your questions into the Q&A or into the questions function that's available on Teams. And as we go through the session, we'll gather those throughout the presentation, and we'll set aside some time at the end for Darren to address any questions that you might have. Pardon me. With that, I'll hand you over to Darren McVicker. Darren, you're very welcome. I'll allow you to introduce the topic on succession planning within manufacturing and take us through the sessions, and I'll come back to you towards the end in terms of the Q&A. Thanks, Darren.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Look, that's a super intro. I suppose, look, many of you might be thinking, why is a recruitment agency talking about succession planning? But if you think about it, we're involved with talent retention and talent recruitment on a daily basis, and we're probably in a very luxurious position of seeing behind the curtain of so many different manufacturing organizations on a daily and weekly basis. And I think one of the things that we see is that succession planning, is that career development pathway, and often that can be a lever for individuals. If you think about why is someone looking at a potentially new opportunity, it's generally three levers. One is salary. Then two is that work-life balance that's so important to people now, and three is career, and it's career progression and career opportunity, and succession planning is all about that. And often I feel that when we talk about succession planning, it's the CEO, it's the MD, it's the board level roles that we're talking about succession planning in, but that's not necessarily your critical roles, and it's not necessarily the heartbeat of your organization, and it's ensuring that you're getting succession planning right. So as Stephen introduced there, for those of you that maybe don't know us, Vickerstock were established in 2008. We're a specialist supplier to the engineering and manufacturing space, and we've been involved in, as Stephen alluded to, thousands and thousands of assignments over the years. So we've got that wonderful insight, I suppose, not necessarily at the cold face of the job, but stepping back, and it gives us, to be honest, it gives us that little bit of a wider perspective, and we feel that there's some benefits that maybe we can feed back in. I'm not going to pretend to tell you that organizations don't know about succession planning and how to, but maybe There's organizations out there that are doing it really well. There's organizations out there that there's maybe room for improvement, and maybe it's not in their thinking. And I think that those organizations that bring it into their everyday thinking, you can see the difference in becoming effectively an employer of choice. So, why succession planning essential at all levels? Um, it, 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 it provides stability, it provides identity, it can help with retention, and it can protect those key skills that are really important. And it reinforces culture of the organization, and it reinforces that belonging. I'm sure many of you know about, the discussions, the wide discussions out there about purpose and the why. And most people want to be with an organization that they feel, part of. And enabling them to feel part of something is actually growth as well. And that's where succession planning for me comes in. It's not just at top level, it's right throughout the organization. So look, we'll go through it. So there's sort of 6 elements to what we feel is good succession planning, and we'll go through that in a little bit more detail. And there's a part of this where I've made some specific notes because I think there's some aspects are really important. Um, and I think there's one element that especially in Northern Ireland, that we need to think about, and it's not just about replacing leaders. It's keeping knowledge within the organizations, and it's ensuring that there's a stability of future growth, and a smooth transition of future growth. There's organizations that we work with that when they started out, the heritage of their organization was producing maybe one certain type of product or manufacturing a certain suite of products, and they've evolved in the direction of their evolution is far and away different from where they started. So it's really important that organizations think about where are we going to be? What's the direction of travel in the next 5, 10 years? And do we have the correct talent within the organization? And do we have the correct talent and skills and knowledge? Is that evolving in the right way that's going to help us be in the position where we want to be in the future? But before we get into that, even if we think about, Northern Ireland, there's roughly 97,000 people employed in manufacturing jobs in Northern Ireland. Somewhere between 30 and 35% of that workforce is at the 50 to 65, 60, well, 67 now, age category of retirement. If we look at the overall pool, and if we think about some things even on a conservative level, if 2% over the next 5 years are retiring, that could be upwards close to 2,000 people leaving the industry. And as we know, the demographic of above 64 is bigger than the demographic of those under 15 in Northern Ireland. So we've got challenges there. We've got challenges on lack of skills. It's always been a challenge in Northern Ireland, certainly over the last 15 to 20 years that I've been involved in this space. But if we look at the high level there, the extreme of it, where there could be up to 6,000 people leaving the sector over the next 5 years, how are we retaining that knowledge? And you might think as your organization has got that under control, and we're looking pretty good, but it's the organizations that are maybe 5 or 10 miles away from you, or within the similar space, that maybe don't have that under control. So that's going to increase competitiveness for the talent that maybe you have, or the talent that you're looking for in the future. So we need to think about how you can grow that from within. And I think that often we miss that because organizations think we're okay, but they don't factor in the almost threats from external threats from other organizations who are maybe can offer something different that may try and attract the talent that you've cultivated and grown. So how do you keep that in house? How do you protect away from those threats? That's things again that we'll get into, but that's a very obvious thing that's happening in NI and across the manufacturing sector in the UK and in Ireland, and it's not unique to us, but it's the retirement and the knowledge that's leaving the space is a definite concern for a lot of organisations. But from an individual organisation, what would I recommend to do at the moment? Get a snapshot of your workforce age, snapshot of your workforce age. Run the same scenario model, the 2%, the 4%, the 6%. What does that look for your How does that look for your organization? How is that potentially going to impact your organization? And also look at what's the critical roles that we have. What's the heartbeat of our organization? What's the roles that if someone wasn't there for a week or 2 weeks, how will that impact production? How will that impact output flows? How maybe will that impact your service to your client base? Also think about, the general retention that you have and attrition rates that you might have, and how that will also factor into your pipeline, and most importantly, measure and review that. That's a quick thing that I would recommend. But the 6 things that I would get into is define your leadership objectives. So where's the company moving to? Where's the organization going? What sort of leadership do you need? It's you don't want to say we just want to build leaders. It's what type of leader do you want to build? What's the culture of leadership that you want to look at there? And when I talk about leadership, I'm not talking about the CEOs and the MDs. I'm talking about, right from maybe what's the leadership within your operators, maybe, or your machine minders. What's the leadership look like there, that potentially can some of those individuals move into the junior engineering roles? Then can the junior engineering roles move up into a more supervisory role, an assistant manager role, or a manager role, a more senior role, a more technical role? So it's not just CEO, MDs, it's right from the bottom. What are the critical roles? And then it's identifying the high potential talent, creating development plans, and then getting that transfer of knowledge effectively done and continually done, because that protects against the risks. And again, measure, progress, and adjust. It's always vitally important in all aspects of manufacturing. So look, if we dig into it a little bit more, for me, this is really crucial. Identifying the objectives and the critical roles. So, your business could be expanding. So are you looking for people that can handle complexity and growth? Or your organization may be going more on an automation or an automating journey, and therefore you maybe need more technical, curious leaders, and those that are not afraid of data or digital tools. They may be the heartbeat of those critical roles. So it's not just a title that's crucial. It's the heartbeat of the organization. What exactly are those critical roles? It's identifying those and getting those right, and what's right for the business. So, it could be your production managers who keep the lines efficient. It could be your quality assurance leads who ensure that the quality of your output is right. Because obviously, as we all know, if that's not right, that could cost you thousands. And even technical experts in food manufacturing, they are always and always will continue to be critical roles. But what is your succession plan within that technical department look like? What if your technical manager decided to move on? Will you lose knowledge there? How are you, what's your succession plan for bringing that technical knowledge through from maybe someone who is a quality inspector or quality insurance and wanting to move into more of those technical positions? So are you bringing those individuals through? So it's career pathway, it's succession planning. It's just really important to protect that. Next, we're looking at identification of talent and spotting who those leaders or future leaders within all those various levels within the organization are. So, often your future leaders aren't necessarily the loudest people in the room. Sometimes they can be the ones that quietly go about their business and get it done effectively and efficiently. But also there's organizations that we work with, and they maybe have 1 or 2 really crucial people, and there'll be many people on this today will be able to resonate with this, that they have someone in a crucial role that is so good at their job that you can't afford to do without them within the team, but you almost can't afford to allow them to take on another role. And we see quite a lot of that. And it's those people that can get hugely frustrated. And it's making sure that you succession plan those individuals. How do you get that knowledge and that experience into other members of the team that are maybe coming up? And often some people can feel, oh, is this a threat to me? Am I teaching someone to replace my job? And that's another thing that you have to balance out. But again, that comes down to the lines of communication. That comes down to how much you communicate succession planning as part of our culture. It's not just those top roles, it's right from the bottom right to the top. And that can handle those. Um, and obviously then when you're identifying the talent, then what is the development plans? And the development plans should be at all aspects of the organization. We work with a client, multi-site client, and they've actually got two ends of the scale. They've got one facility that has an engineering team of circa 50, and they never need an external partner such as us, because they're so good at the succession planning right from the bottom right to the top. So they recently had a fairly senior person within their engineering department move on for another opportunity. But they were able to almost move 3 or 4 people, all had that little progression up. And they constantly identify skills, talent, knowledge that needs to be replaced and grown, and needs to almost future-proof that department. And what actually happens there then is that those that are maybe entering the engineering team at the very bottom have the case studies, can see this organization, this facility will help my career develop and progress. And that brings in itself an element of loyalty, an element of job satisfaction and happiness in the role. And that contributes massively to retention. It also contributes massively to the culture and the experience of the individuals. So whilst, yeah, they may get a knock on the door to say, would you consider this role? They're not going to be making a move for, a certain amount of money. They're gonna have that loyalty and that feeling of part of something with that organization. But on the other hand, they have another facility where historically succession planning wasn't part of the culture of the engineering team in the other facility. And what they have now is what can only be described as a little bit of a mess, and they're in a scramble for trying to bring in external talent, trying to settle the ones that are currently in that department. And it's almost a constant firefight. And what you have there is real brand reputational damage, because external individuals who are potentially looking at that facility as a potential future employer see the constant attrition. They see, okay, what's the problems? What's wrong? It doesn't seem to have a flow there, and they don't want to become part of that. And in a competitive world that is engineering and manufacturing across Northern Ireland, across the UK, it's all the same with the skills challenges and skills shortages. That doesn't make them an employer of choice. And that's one organization, but two different facilities, two completely different experiences, because they don't have that succession planning right from the very bottom right through right to the top. And it's phenomenal, the difference that you can see. Knowledge transfer is super important, as everyone will attest to. And the fear of that knowledge walking out the door is can send shivers down the spines of CEOs and MDs, and probably HR as well, because they're going to have to frantically find someone that can replace those. But if succession planning is at the heart of your culture of your organization, then that's almost going to be mitigated. Of course, nothing is foolproof, but if you have, we often look at it and go that the individual at maybe level one should know a minimum of 20 to 30% of level two's roles and responsibilities, and keep going up and up and up. Not only does it give them the experience of understanding the pressures that the person above them is maybe under and why they need them to carry out their tasks to help them, but it also gives them the opportunity to see, this is what's involved for me to make that step up and move. And if you have that constant knowledge flow coming down and moving up, then you're retaining that knowledge. And that's crucial for any organization within manufacturing. And again, it's that sense of belonging. Again, it contributes to that sense of retention. And ultimately, it's going to contribute to the bottom line because you're more competitive and you're probably spending a lot less time worrying about external recruitment and recruitment budgets. And finally, it's the last bit on that is the metrics and the progress and the measurement of it. And it's highlighting how good you are at that. It's communicating how good you are at that. It's communicating with all levels of the team that this is important. This is what we do. You can see how much you're progressing. You can see what extra knowledge you have. You can see that you're maybe 20 to 30% of the way there of understanding what the next level of the role is. And those that want to aspire to go to move up, they'll feed on that and want more of that. And honestly, you wouldn't believe how many times we speak to people and they talk about, I've been here so long, there's no pathway for me, there's no development for me. I don't see my career progressing. And more times than not, that's their perception because it hasn't been communicated to them. And what a lot of people will say is I've worked here for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it should be, and they haven't taken the time to communicate that with me. If they're going to communicate that to me now, it's too late. When I'm about to walk out the door, it's too late for me then. So avoiding those scenarios is really important. And those lines of communication, but the culture of succession planning, right from top to bottom, bottom to top, if that is deeply ingrained in your organization, then they'll see that on a constant basis, and it will undoubtedly contribute to your retention. And ultimately, if we're recruiting for an organization, and one of the first things that we'll ask them beyond the qualifying the job and understanding the roles and the requirements, etc., we'll ask them, do you have case studies of career development and career growth? And the more case studies that you can give us and examples that you can give us within your organization is a huge competitive edge when we're speaking to individuals who are potentially thinking of joining your company. And as you all know, your number one choice of employee or future employee is not only your number one choice, they'll be the number one choice for a variety of organizations. So it can give you that competitive edge. So it is so important. And if you have that succession planning ethos, that will resonate, that will emanate, and that will naturally be communicated in the manufacturing world. I think we could all probably name at least one example of an organization that is phenomenal at doing that at the moment. So look, linking succession and leadership training, again, it's similar to what I alluded to in terms of those 20%, those 30%, educating them and moving them up the chain, retaining that knowledge. Some of the pressures that we're under at the moment, looking at the slide there, preparing leaders to handle the manufacturing 4.0, digitalization, the supply chain pressures that everybody's under, and always within manufacturing, they're always looking for continuous improvement initiatives. So what knowledge and experience can be gained at all levels moving up, so as when they're moving forward, you're not losing anything if someone is deciding to leave, or if someone is retiring, or they're looking to exit your organization. Best practice with anything is start early. If we take the two examples of the client that I used the example of, one of them started years ago, the other one hasn't started yet. when was the best time to start? Yes, it was years ago, but other than that, when's the best time to start? Is to start now. But I think it's communicating with your teams and with your organizations that this is what we're going to do. And then it's seeing that through. And it's also letting them and letting your organization see the rewards of that, the progress of that. And that's where the measurement and the metrics come into it. Yeah. Yeah. So common challenges, obviously there can be resistance to change. That's you're never going to change that. But it again comes down to the communication, the buy-in, and really, is this going to be in our culture? Is this embedded in what we're doing? Are we an organization that really takes succession planning super important? You're always going to have limited resources, and I understand the challenges of daily operations and everything else that goes on in the world. And you're probably thinking, well, when am I getting the time to do this? But making the time to do it will probably save you time in all certain aspects of all the other challenges that you'll face in running a manufacturing organization. And prioritizing your skills gaps and the development plans. As we've said, there are such as quality, such as lean, or such as automation, but that'll be different for different organizations. So it's understanding where's the skills that we have at the moment, and are we future ready for what skills we're going to need for 5 years' time. So again, going back to the demographics on retirement, it is a factor. It is an issue, and apprenticeship schemes and graduate schemes are super important. They really are. But I think probably everybody on here will agree that they're not quite enough. And you've organizations out there like Mega who are doing unbelievable things in that apprenticeship and graduate schemes. But is it enough to keep the flow going through? It probably isn't. So for an organization such as yourself, how can you add to the great things that Meg is doing? It's the succession planning. It's retention of staff, and it's how you keep them engaged and involved. And honestly, if you think about those three levers that I talked about, the salary, the work-life balance, that's something you guys will organize. But the career development, succession planning, it's one and the two same things. And it's something that I think I've mentioned it maybe 10 times here in terms of embedding that into your culture and your organization. It is so important. Look, succession planning, it's going to create resilience. It's going to create a future ready workforce. And by aligning your leadership and your development with business strategy, you can maintain stability, you can drive innovation, and you can stay competitive in that talent war that we're really all involved in. So that's kind of a whistle top. That might have been super fast. It might have been too detailed. It might have been light on detail. But if you have any specific questions, either now or in over the coming weeks, feel free to contact me, and I can give you our perspective on what we see really good and what we see some companies doing as development plans that are working really well. So that's pretty much me. If there's any questions now, I'm happy to answer.
Darren, that was excellent. I think that was the right level of detail and at the right pace as well, just to reassure you there. Very clear, actionable ideas that people can take with them. So from my perspective, just to say thanks to start with, that was excellent. We have a couple of questions, and being the chair of this meeting, I've the right to actually ask the questions first, the ones that are in my mind and manufacturing in I's mind. But you mentioned about succession planning that really supports business stability, reinforces culture, allows for growth. But how do you strike that balance between those internal promotions, which is building those people up, that upskilling pillar that you talked about? So how do you kind of strike the balance between those internal promotions and bringing in that external talent?
That's an interesting one, and that depends on where the organization is traveling to. So we're working with a client at the moment, for example, who have done a skills analysis on a certain level within their organization, and what they've identified is that they've great people, who need developed, but actually they don't have a level of individuals that can bring that organization through. And what they're actually looking for is that external expertise to come in and help the organization develop. So, there is undoubtedly scenarios where you can develop people up, but there can be times, maybe based on the business direction, where they do need to bring in external to help then the organization as a whole develop in a certain way. So I don't think those scenarios will ever go away, but I think that when you're presenting yourself as an employer of choice, which, forgive me, but if you go on the job boards, you would think that every single organization in the world is an award-winning organization, because that's hard to describe. But it's about the culture. It's about behind the scenes. And, what is it they say? If someone has a bad experience in a restaurant, nine people will find out about it. It's the same with the culture of organizations, that everyone is peers within the wider space, the wider sector, though that information travels. So I think in order to potentially attract that new level of expertise in, they want to see that there is that investment in the individuals, because they don't want to walk in to firefight a big problem. The best people aren't going to come and do that. So I think that's an answer dependent on the organization where they're looking to go, if that makes sense.
Does. And I mean, you offered a really simple challenge to everybody online and watching later to basically look at their workforce and kind of assess the age of them. What happens in the next number of years? You lose 2%, 4%, 6%. And
Yeah.
many manufacturers are worried about talent being nicked, for want of a phrase, by
Yeah.
competitors or go to other
Yeah.
locations. But actually, that's the first time I've heard somebody really challenge us to kind of go, well, never mind losing people to other organizations, people just age out,
Hmm.
and people get tired and unable to do the particular roles or jobs. So I think that's a really good place for people to start, is just to stop and look at the population that they have within their organization and just do that simple kind of metric, because only when you measure what a problem may look like can you begin to kind of address the situation.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
really good advice for organizations of all sizes, including SMEs. But if there were an organization watching in at the moment that doesn't have that dedicated HR function within their organization, where do you think they should really start with that succession planning piece, aside from that advice of just just doing a bit of a population study about who's actually with you at the moment?
I would look at, if it was me, I would be looking at the critical roles. And when people talk about succession planning, sometimes they think about uh, job titles and not roles. So very often in manufacturing organizations, the heartbeat of the manufacturing organization and the business as a whole is that middle ground. It's those technical experts. It's those quality assurance people. It's the production managers. It's the engineering expertise that, you know, it could take external partners 3 hours to solve the problem, and they can sort it in 15 minutes. So it's looking at what is really critical and focusing on that, and then going, okay, worst case scenario, what if we lose this? So then how do we begin to negate that? And that's not by going, oh, we'll just replace it from another external person. Um, it's actually, how do we transfer the knowledge into the rest of the wider team? Um, and I appreciate, you may not every organization does have a HR function, but I think they should look at a critical skills org chart, as opposed to an org chart by job title. Actually, a critical skills org chart, and ensure that they have those 20-30% being passed down to the next levels. Because then as they move up, they'll be able to take on more of that. And should someone fall out of that critical skills org chart, it's easier to manage that because, look, we've all been on phone calls where a crucial individual has left and it's an absolute scramble. We need someone yesterday. And what happens there is then they rush to hire and they may not always get it right. And then they're in the cycle again. And then the perception can be, oh, is there a problem with that job? You know, just because they maybe haven't got the next fit right because they wanted speed over precision. So it's I think it's again, it's that culture of succession planning and being spreading the load almost and spreading the knowledge. I think that's where I would focus on and make sure I can get that right.
And I think that's again very wise advice. We're all get hung up on job titles, but actually it's the roles that are more
Yeah,
critical. Somebody may have a job title of an accountant or whatever in an organization, but they're the only person that knows how to fix that critical piece of equipment
yeah,
that may be in the organization. So actually focusing on roles, functions rather than job titles is probably a good place to
yeah.
start. And kind of in that kind of general theme, Damien's asked here, what's a realistic time frame for developing successors and for known retirement timelines? What's the ideal kind of transitional runway to overlap with the mentoring?
I
When you talk there about
well,
people in crises and all of a sudden there's a
yeah.
massive problem. So if you're thinking about doing this piece of work, what's a good time frame to be kind of working through this piece?
Again, and this is potentially a vague answer, Damien, but it's that's going to be unique to your organizations. But what I would say is if you begin from bottom up and part of everybody's role is to learn an element of the responsibility of the next role above, then if that's a continue, it kind of needs to be continuous. But if you have the other end of the coin is if you have someone in that retirement world, anybody can, you can see people retire out from generally they can start at 54 up. So I suppose you need to have that communication with individuals to see what is their plans, or communicate, here's the business plans for the next 5 years. What is how do you see your fit within where we're going? This is part of it. Are you going to be part of this journey? Would you like to be part of this journey? Does this excite you? You could see someone who was maybe thinking about retiring in the next 4 years suddenly think, you know what? No, I'm moving. I'm staying here for the next 8. And I'm sure everybody on board here knows Ryan Tierney and the good work that Ryan Tierney does. But he shared a post recently on LinkedIn about taking over Spur and Metals, and he talked to one of the guys on the production floor, and the difference that has been made. This chap worked there for 25 years. And he said, I can't believe the difference we've made in the last 6 weeks. I really enjoy coming here. The space is clear. I'm absolutely loving it. I look at that individual going, do you know what? He maybe could have thought, another 1 or 2 years here and I'm done. But all of a sudden you can see the vibrancy in him, and he's thinking, I'm going to stay here for 3, 4, 5 years. This is exciting. Where's this place going? So it's again, that's not a precision answer, but it's the culture. It's about how you get people involved. And if you're continually talking about succession planning and the timelining, those people that are involved in that, bought into that, and maybe at that level where they're thinking of retiring out, they're going to communicate back with you to say, here's my plan. And they're potentially going to be more invested actually in transferring that knowledge. Like most of us, I think everybody takes great pride in being able to pass down knowledge to someone else, and great pride in watching someone else be able to do something that you have taught them to do. There's those emotional things are so important, and that breeds retention. It brings loyalty. It breeds that, purposefulness and why, and I'm part of something. It gives them more value than just coming in and picking up a salary and going home, and it's just seen as a job. There's more to it if you build that into it. That's why I'm saying, and I think I said it 10 plus times, ingraining that succession planning in your culture is so, so important. Um, now it might actually do me out of a lot of work here if I keep on going, but genuinely, and I jest there because it actually makes you an employer of choice and makes you guys really more attractive and actually makes it easier for us.
And kind of in that kind of general theme, kind of a positive one, and then maybe a more challenging and negative question, one after the other here. But I'll start with the positive. I mean, you talked about that guy's experience at Spur Metal and how he's reinvigorated. I
Mhm.
Are there signals that kind of help identify someone perhaps on the shop floor or throughout the organization that might have that leadership potential? And are there things that people should be looking out for to go, do you know what? We're going to lose that guy in a couple of years, but actually he's got a bit of potential here. We'll invest in him and he'll invest in himself. And how do you kind of spot those people?
Um, do you know what? There's no easy answer on that. But I think that you can often see leadership qualities in people who are very much of, they're not that's not my job. That's not my role. They're generally they're happy to help beyond the remits of what their position is, beyond their job description, if you like. They're also very curious in terms of maybe new machinery that comes in. They want to know more. They do that little bit more research on things. And you know, within manufacturing, technical knowledge is so important, but so too is people management and people skills and the ability to bring people along with you and the ability to, you know, create a bond with people and give them direction and get buy-in. That there is soft skills that just can't be taught, and it's spotting those individuals that can do that. So there's the technically brilliant people who are super important, but there's also the people management people who are super important for bringing the team, bringing those early adopters on, bringing the middle ground, and then bringing the ones that are kicking and screaming at the end. They seem to have the ability to do that, whereas there can be leaders out there who are maybe you often see it when there's an element of arrogance and I know best, that can sort of clash with people. So I think if you look at it two ways, both technical and cultural and people management and the soft skills bit, it, getting both is brilliant. They're a superstar. But it generally goes in two ways. And what you can often find with the technical brilliant is they are almost the lone wolf who just want to work on their own, don't want someone else annoying them. Kind of almost go, don't worry, I'll sort it. But it's how you get those individuals to help pass on that knowledge and experience without them feeling that they're being almost replaced. That's a really key quality to be able to do as well.
And in that theme about identifying people's leadership capability, and there's a couple of questions here from Amy, but I'll kind of link the first one of them to what you've just said. And Amy's asking about challenging people with stretch assignments. So
Mhm.
giving them a job to do that they may believe is beyond their professional or their capabilities. Uh, have you seen
Yeah,
kind of examples of that where people are given, here you go, Darren, we see something in you you probably don't see in yourself. We're going to give you this project, this idea, this whatever,
yeah,
to really stretch yourself and try yourself to see if that kind of brings out that leadership
yeah.
capability.
Well, there is that. There's definitely part of that, and that generally happens on a project basis, where they'll be given a project or assignment to look after. But an element of that stretch is almost going hand in hand with that 20% that we're talking about learning the 20% of the role above. And then as they grow, they're getting that little bit more, 10%, 10%, 10%. What I always feel is it's great to be able to say that, you give someone a promotion, for example, and everyone else in the team or the facility will look around and go, do you know what? They absolutely deserve that because they're almost already doing that job. And that creates, it removes any sense of nepotism or favoritism, and it creates a sense of you're rewarded for what you do, and there's a clear lines on that. So I suppose stretch could be an element of those 20 or 30%. But if you have projects where you can get people to do that and then give them recognition of it, absolutely brilliant. I was with a client yesterday, and they were actually their graduates for the last 2 years were graduating out of their internal program, and part of that was to present. They all went in teams, and it was to develop a new product and present that to the overall CEO, the international CEO. So they come over, a couple of other senior leaders come over, came on facility, all the graduates done their presentations, and there was a decision made and an awards given. That they all were stretched in those, but there were also seemed to be rewards. They probably all learned a little bit more about themselves. If you have opportunity to do that, absolutely would encourage it. And that again, it creates identity, it creates loyalty, it creates we're part of something. And I know lots of people, there's always that talk of why and that purposefulness. You nearly get that. But there's always talk of it, but how do you make that real? And it's making that real is the crucial thing. And if you can do that, then and people can see that, and it's measured and it's rewarded, and you can see the progress, not necessarily for them as an individual, but others and the group and the whole organization. It's phenomenal, phenomenal.
And I'll finish with kind of two questions. One was the negative one, or kind of negative connotations that I talked about, and then I'll finish with a kind of more positive. But what about those people who just don't want to do this? Those people that you need them to step up, you need them
Mhm.
to get on board with this kind of succession planning culture that you have, but actually they're approaching the end of their working life and they just don't want to do it. How do you kind of deal with those people?
Um, uh, I think every organization will have those challenges with those individuals. There's always the ones who come kicking and screaming at the end. I think personally, I feel that if you build a culture where that's part of the organization, no one wants to stick out like a sore thumb and go, no, I'm not going to do that. They almost feel compelled to fall into line with it. Um, but I suppose that's also part of if you had that succession planning going, then you would be able to create that culture. Um, there's always going to be issues and problems. But if you're spreading the load from that individual to, and that's already being done to other to others levels below, and they're already getting 20 or 30% of that individual's experience and knowledge, then the 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 big handover mightn't be so bad, because I think generally those individuals are the big handover as opposed to incremental and little bits and pieces. It's probably how I'd deal with that one or
Good.
advise on that one.
Absolutely. And I suppose in that context as well, when the culture is permeates throughout the organization, it's actually easier, I suggest, for people to take their own responsibility for their own leadership, their own
Yeah,
development, rather than waiting
yeah,
for their employer necessarily
yeah,
to do that. And that's probably a really good place for any organization to be in, and that overcomes those objectors and overcomes those people that maybe aren't fully on board, because when they see around them an environment that they have to take responsibility for their own development, which is always a much stronger place to be. Kind of final
yeah.
question, Darren, you're obviously working across these islands and in Europe with manufacturing businesses. We we always we always wake up in the morning, the leaders in those organizations travel and hope. There's a optimism bias there. Today's going to be a better day than yesterday. We're going to win a new big client. We're going to be 5% more productive, whatever the case may be. The sun's
Yeah.
always shining. But in your experience working across these islands in Europe, and how vibrant is the manufacturing sector, and why should people come and join us and establish careers in the sector?
Uh, honestly, you can. I don't watch the news that much, to be honest, because it's never that positive. But when we go into companies and organizations, and they really and most of the clients now that we deal with, that they engage with us deeply. We're kind of, we've been doing this so long, they know us, we know them, and they bring us right in, and they probably give us an inside track into where they're going and what their challenges are and the type of people that they're looking for in the future. Um, I, I can't speak highly enough of this space in this sector. You know, the career development, the career opportunities, some of, if you even take it down to brass tacks, and some of the salaries that you can aspire to and get to, phenomenal. Some of the projects, experiences, travel opportunities, people that you can work with, things you can be involved in, um, product that you can be involved in, product development, new product development. It's the list is endless. Speaking to two 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 of the clients, one that we've been doing a lot of ongoing work with, we're talking about a new R&D that they've invested in that will put them light years ahead of their nearest competitor. That's a Northern Ireland manufacturing organization, by the way. And they are so confident about where this is going to go. And when they launch it, it's going to be huge. We've got a little bit of an inside track in that. Who wouldn't want to be involved in that? Another client that we're dealing with are developing, they're in food manufacturing, they're developing flavors and tastes and processes and ways that are going to reinvent certain product. And again, you're just thinking, you just don't know these things are going on. It's so I if I was speaking to graduates, I could not, or even those going, they're deciding to go into university, I would be encouraging them to find trains of thought and ways of how you can enter into the manufacturing space, because you're creating new things. For me, we're really passionate. I'm 25 years in this space. I'm super passionate about this. And, you've got the likes of Mega and who the work that they're doing to encourage new people to come into the space. They're phenomenal at that as well. And what they're achieving there. And Stephen, and shout out to you for all the great things that you do for the space in the sector. I know how well you're thought of. In Northern Ireland alone, it's phenomenal. Beyond this corner of the world, Ireland, UK, Europe, where you can go, what you can get involved in. We a couple of years ago there, we were sponsoring Formula Student at Queen's, where they developed the go-karts, and I know a couple of manufacturing organizations in NI are also involved in that. Nearly all of those students are involved with Formula One race teams. You don't think those opportunities exist, but they're all out there, and some of them will eventually be on the track at senior engineers on the cars. How exciting is that? But there's examples of that across all different facets of manufacturing, and you all know this yourself, Stephen. But I feel it's one of the most vibrant sectors that you could join, and sectors that you get so much from.
Couldn't agree more. Darren, thanks very much for the session. There's some really simple, practical steps for people to take, uh, that I think will, even if they just do those things, will help transform their organization and hopefully make some people involved in leadership and HR sleep a bit better at night as well, uh,
Yeah.
as a minimum. Because these are challenges, particularly in a market where we don't have a growing population and we don't have a migration regime that makes it easy for people to recruit those skills from overseas. We've been saying for the last 5 years, assume from this day forward, you will never be able to recruit anybody ever again. And if you approach each working day in that mindset, where I just can't fire labor at this. I need to fire much more than labor at this. I need to fire our entire culture and business strategy around dealing with the challenges of recruiting people, retaining people, and making ourselves genuinely that employer of choice in any particular market or sector or location. So your practical advice today is very refreshing, very welcome, and hopefully people will carry that into their businesses. Uh, those people that want to, Darren and his colleagues are more than happy to have a conversation. I'm sure they'll jump in a car and drive down to see you if required
Yeah,
as
sure.
well. We will share a copy of Darren's slides. We'll share a copy of the recording of this on our e-zine, so don't feel that you have to kind of scribble loads of notes or try to find your notes later on. Darren, thank you for your support for manufacturing NI, support for the sector. Thanks for your wise advice this afternoon, and we'll catch you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Take care, everyone. Thank you.